Welcome to Troubleshooting Innovation, a commercial baking podcast, sponsored by Oaks. Worldwide since 1946, Oaks is your partner for mixing and depositing process solutions in commercial baking. I'm your host, Joanie Spencer, Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Baking, and I'm spending this season with Marc and Elana Schulman, the second and third generations of leadership at Chicago-based Eli's Cheesecake. We are exploring innovation, growth, longevity, and resilience through the eyes of a family-owned bakery. In this episode, we are delving into Eli's unique workforce development strategies and discovering best practices that any bakery can emulate. Hi, Marc and Elana. Thanks for joining me again this week.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Yes.
Okay, so I've had so much fun so far just talking about how Eli's was built and talking about what makes a Chicago-style cheesecake and how Eli set that standard. But this week, I want to talk about the people in your bakery who make the cheesecakes because you guys do some really special things. So I'm very excited to get into this with you. I'm just gonna make the first question really short and sweet. You guys treat your workforce really well. Why?
Well, growing up in the restaurant business with my father, if you're in the restaurant business, who's the most important person? The dishwasher, the busboy. And Eli had these core values that he used to pass out to his customers that drive us: treat the other as if you were the other, and charity will never bust you. So, your mind has to be in the right place. Interestingly, in the workforce, there are times when there's not a lot of people to hire, and then businesses suddenly are very focused on, recruitment and retention. Years ago when we were expanding, we were working with the city, we were trying to get other food companies interested in some of our educational initiatives. And the attitude was, by some, hey, we'd rather keep our people stupid. But we're not going back there again. Minimum wage rules have changed dramatically. Immigration laws have changed dramatically. And we don't hire temporary workers. We hire permanent associates and go through some of the ways that we do it. But we have people who are here for a long time. And if you want to keep people, treat them like you want to be treated. So, if it's coming out of COVID, we feed every associate a hot lunch every day. We give everybody cheesecakes to go home every week, something we've made. So we try to do those things. But I think where we've really worked hard is on educational initiatives and also taking steps that help expand the diversity and skill sets of our people. And I think that really over the years that we were fortunate that we partnered with several institutions, one being Wright College, which is our neighboring community college of Chicago, and then also the Chicago High School for Agricultural Sciences, which is one of the few public high schools in the country dedicated to producing leaders in food and agriculture. So they've been great partners. And then we've really worked to bring education in the workplace. Originally, in 1991, when we partnered with Wright College for Eli's U, which is our on-site GED ESL program. And then interestingly, it was that program that created the visit by Bill and Hillary Clinton in March of 1992. But bringing education into the workplace and being able to continue that over the years as we move to this facility. And actually, one of our next phase of plans for growth is building out the space we've dedicated for an education and innovation center so we could do even more for our people and then more for the community as well.
Okay, so I think this is really interesting because you're touching on something that doesn't get talked about a lot. When you talk about education, it's twofold. You are educating your workforce on how to do their jobs, but you're also enabling them to have a high school diploma, essentially. Not a lot of bakeries talk about how they're educating their workforce just to be productive members of society in general and giving them a general education. How is doing that benefiting your workforce and then in turn benefiting the business? Because there really has to be a business case for everything, even if that's not the primary reason for it.
Well, in January of this year, really fortunate that Secretary of State Anthony Blinken came to Eli's, and that was because of our long success and partnership in hiring refugees. And in his remarks, Secretary Blinken took what I had said to him, because everybody's going, well, God, you're so great, you do this. And then I'm going, but if this individual is going to school at Eli's, if that individual is then going on to get a 4-year degree or technical training, it's really their investment and their commitment. And whatever bakery you're talking about today or food company in the world, we all need more trained people. So, I'm saying it's a good thing to do, but it's really good business as well. And I think, again, if you want long term associates, because the skill sets and the flexibility is just so much better when you have people are with you 10, 20, 30 years in terms of what they do. And I think education is something that we have a history of doing, but we really want to be able to do much more. And I think over the last few years, as there's been more expansion of refugees, again, coming to the U.S. and in our employment, that ability of working to help them, of ongoing training is going to, again, make them better associates, but certainly, better for their own lives. And, they go together, but I think, you need respect. You need to respect all of our cultures. If it's our associates who came, from Afghanistan today, we have a number of associates now coming from Ukraine. Our vice president of procurement, Elias Kasango, came from the Congo 29 years ago. In the dish room, got his GED, got his associate's degree, got his college degree from Northeastern, and went, from the dish room to the C-suite because of his work. But I think that ability to create an environment for success and giving people those opportunities is just been critical to what we do. And with the great partnership of Bright College and then other work that we're doing today, for which Elana could talk about, with students with disabilities, we're creating better career paths for people to pursue careers in food, and then also in at Eli's.
Okay, so let's talk about that, Elana, because that's a program that I'm less familiar with as opposed to the Eli's U and the work with Refugee One. So let's talk about this initiative with students with disabilities.
So one thing I just generally want to say about these long-term partnerships and different hiring strategies, like these go back 30 years. And that's what I think is really, my dad has really dedicated his life to this work. And so that is really meaningful for me to come in and to see that. And it's not just something that, is just a recent development, and it's not for optics. So that's something that I've really appreciated about, his long-term commitment. But, we've been hiring individuals with cognitive and developmental disabilities for a long time. But more recently, we started this program in partnership with Wright College and the Chicago High School for Ag Sciences. And it's a state-funded program called Project Right Access. We just finished our third cohort. And basically the idea is that students with cognitive and developmental disabilities that are sort of in this transitioning year where they're going to be leaving their schools, where there's all this support, have this big moment where they can join the workforce and develop all of these really amazing sort of workforce skills, but you have to have the right partners to do that and the right people sort of behind the scenes to help with that. And so we've just been really lucky to work with so many amazing educators and administrators on this program. And we've actually hired 2 students from this program who are working in various roles in the bakery. But the idea is that you should have the same access to jobs and life experiences regardless of ability. And so it's been an amazing project for me to work on, and just have formed really incredible relationships with all of the people that are working on it, and just seeing the joy and happiness of these new associates that came from this program. They're so proud to be in the workforce, to work at Eli's. They literally are skipping into the building. They're so happy. And more, we hope through this program that more companies will sort of do the program and also provide more opportunities. But it's been something that we've done for a long time, but then more formally through this program.
I was actually thinking when Marc answered the first question, as he was sort of describing these philosophies from a historic perspective, I was thinking, there are a lot of companies who recognize the labor crisis that the industry is in, and they're trying to come up with new initiatives, whereas Eli's has always been doing this. And while that is just another thing that makes this company really special, I do think that this episode in particular is really important because companies can learn new practices for solving workforce and labor issues by learning from what you've been doing since the bakery started.
Absolutely. And I think that if it's community colleges, Refugee One, part of Vaughan High School, Chicago High School for Ag Sciences, partners who can work with you, help those associates, because, one of the other points of hiring people for the long term is it's not where people start, it's where they finish. So, you want to give them the opportunities to be successful. So again, it creates a more rounded company. I think we have associates here, 20, 30 countries. Obviously, many languages are spoken. We do a lot of things to honor holidays and traditions. And I think if everyone shares that passion for quality and customer service and growth, it makes our job much more possible to be successful. So again, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but it's also the best thing to do for business. And it's what makes our product stand out and someone understands better why it's special.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So logistically or organizationally, how do you manage so many different programs and initiatives? Do you have a specific team that's dedicated to this? Elana, is this all your charge, or is there one person in charge of each specific initiative? Just from an organizational standpoint, what does that look like?
My dad is looking at me. It's kind of an all hands on deck situation. I think we would love to be like, oh, it's all very planned out and this group of people is responsible for this. It's really a collaboration between me, my dad. We have an amazing human resources team, and it's kind of a labor of love of coming together and kind of figuring out the best way we can support our associates.
And then if we're hosting, a job shadow for the Chicago High School for Ag Sciences, or we just finished a 5-week summer program for 8 of their students with Wright College, where we bring in speakers and they get college credit, and our food safety team's involved and our decorating team is involved because they have a competition in decorating cakes. I think, again, that goal has to be to create that welcoming environment. If you're hiring an individual with a disability, or it's an individual who this is their first job in the United States, or you're hiring someone who's never worked in a bakery in manufacturing before, the fact that everyone is creating a welcoming environment and being supportive is just really critical. So I think they sort of go hand in hand. I think, we've just had these great partnerships. And the one thing that gets hard sometimes, I have spent time with other companies trying to convince them that they should do these things. And you really learn that there's some companies who see the benefits and other companies think, hey, today we'll do the minimum possible. And, maybe they'll move their facility because the minimum wage is a little cheaper across the border. But we found that, this strategy works really well for us. And again, quoting Eli, treat the other as though you're the other. Charity will never bust you. Doing the right thing has really allowed us to succeed and grow. And really, the skills and dedication to our workforce are an important part of that.
This episode is brought to you by Oaks. An important part of choosing the right equipment is the opportunity to try it. Oaks recognizes this critical step in the selection process by making many technologies available through an equipment rental system. Try Oaks equipment in your plant today. Visit www.oaks.com. That's www.oakes.com to learn more. So when you mentioned that there probably are still manufacturing companies out there that focus more on the bottom line first, those are the ones who are much more reactive in terms of the current labor situation. But I think you would agree that this labor situation is not going away. I think that this is a new reality that's going to be a baseline for normal moving forward. So I do think the ones who are not on board need to get on board, or they're going to eventually pay a heavier price. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And, the few other parts of it, our wages are certainly up dramatically. So you need a more productive associate. Too, within the SQF audit now, there is a section on having a culture of food safety, quality.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's definitely moving in that direction. And again, we're one company, one plant. Elana and I are people who say, well, where's your headquarters? Well, it's in the bakery, you're there, with your people. And, hey, it's worked well, but you can't live in the past. And, if we're talking about, we got this award or we did whatever 10 or 20 years ago, that's really irrelevant to the discussion. The question is, how do we expand? This summer, we've had an associate working as a consultant on expanding educational opportunities for all associates, because you really do want to give every person, if they want it, a personal development plan where they could take a class at Wright, or if they, want to go to pursue a 4-year degree or a graduate degree, to say, you're here, just don't think because you started in the workforce that your opportunities for education have ended. I always remember the day before my father died, and I was with him, and it was Governor Thompson's birthday party, and we were coming back, and I'm, reading my father this prospectus, and we're going over this company and opportunities and challenges. And Eli's was always thinking, for me, I always say, readers are leaders. So I read a lot and share that knowledge. Obviously, read Commercial Baking and the newsletters and everything else. But, the more that Eli's is a learning environment, and that knowledge is not only at the top levels, but really throughout the organization, is a much better chance that we'll have the long-term success we envision.
So you're sort of answering my next question already, because I was sitting here thinking about like professional development in more general terms and training that is across the board for everyone. And while you have these incredible programs to enable access to do the job for anyone, regardless of their background, once an employee is in the door, what do your programs look like for not only onboarding, but also sort of training up so that employees have opportunities to advance in the company and create that longevity that you're talking about?
And that's really where they had focus, because I know in a future episode, we'll talk about COVID and the impact. And obviously, a lot of our activities had to be curtailed. But I think we always know we need to do better. And, there may be an individual who says, look, first of all, there's certain training that's essential, for the job. There's certain tests that individuals need to take every year in training within their job. But I would say where we see the highest priority for our workforce today is additional work-related training on the floor, and then also that ability to get the training or just educational experiences. So it's a work in process. We're a little tight on space. Sometimes, like when we did our ESL program, we lose our conference room for like 4 days a week for half the day. So, that's why we want to be able to add the other space to do it. And then the other part is if we could encourage people and give them the incentive to do it. So you go to Wright College, which is a block away, or you go take classes online. And then, we're doing more short courses because, again, as we talk about equipment today, biggest issue of quality can be, is the equipment set up right? Is it giving the right readings? What are we doing in that? In the end, that operator, and everyone's an operator, do they have the appropriate skills to operate that piece of equipment safely and with quality? So, I think we have more work to do. And again, that's good because it's not the awards you get, it's what the plans are for the future. And I think the more that you see that motivated workforce, and, we're proud when people, take tours of our facility to see that people are smiling, people are engaged, people are acknowledging other people. And that's the type of environment that we want to be.
Absolutely. And I think you do have that reputation. You said something that sparked a thought for me, and talking about the equipment, and especially as things are more automated and more technologically advanced. I've seen a couple of conversations lately that kind of got me thinking. Automation is really helping in terms of creating a more equitable work environment in some respects, in that like manual tasks that women or people with disabilities weren't previously able to do that they are now able to do. But at the same time, like you said, like these are highly advanced pieces of equipment that need some level of education to learn how to use them. So are you seeing sort of that trade-off? Like, how are you guys navigating that, creating opportunities, but also navigating the challenges that come with those opportunities?
Yeah. Well, I think at a certain point in time, you would update your equipment when you're working on your standards. I mean, you have to be able to do it. And really, no one can go, the challenge is, look, we can start a lineup or a product and it's extremely manual because that's what you have to do. And then you have a plan because in the long term, the costs of associates is just too high. However, when you are able to show an individual, if it's maybe the size of the mixer or it's the type depositor we're using or the individually wrapped packaging equipment, that there's no way you'd be able to do without sophisticated equipment. But how important it is to have the right people having the skill sets to set up the equipment, to clean that equipment. I know in your work, touring bakeries, to see when someone takes a depositor apart and then puts it back together again, that you're taking pieces of equipment that there could be, hundreds of pieces, and yet people are doing it every day. So that also comes back to a long-term associate and saying, hey, I'm going to learn this job. You just can't have a temp walk in off the street, do this job. But I think they go well together. I think if you have a more dedicated, talented workforce to success, that allows there to be, long-term continued wage growth, other benefits, profit sharing, other things that come along from being successful. And if, you just tried to do it on the backs of your people by just sheer how much you made without any concern for investment to go with it, you wouldn't be around very long.
Yeah.
Something I was going to say is, I was like recently talking to our chief engineer who's been at Eli's for a really long time. And we were talking about kind of this next generation of people on our maintenance team and like skills that need to be developed, and just obviously how technologically advanced equipment has become. And there's computers everywhere,
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm going to start having my team. Like there's a couple people that I think would be really great, like programmers, and learning that. And it's like, these are probably conversations that were not happening 15 years ago, 20 years ago, And so I think it's really thinking ahead and thinking about what are the skills necessary to be successful, and really thinking differently than before, because everything is changing so quickly. We need to have those skill sets in-house in order to be successful.
Yeah. And, it got me kind of thinking, like you said, in the past, it was go get an engineering degree, learn how to be an engineer, and then you can apply those skills to operating this equipment. Whereas now it seems like, especially in this environment of learning at Eli's, you can be on this equipment and you have access to learn those skills. And then you're kind of feeding into that engineering type of education so that they're getting the opportunity to learn the skills without having to go out and earn the degree where they might not have that opportunity out in the real world.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think we're trying to, so my dad mentioned Eli's U, which was like this GED ESL program. And right now a big project I'm working on is really like building that program out. And part of that is doing more check-ins with managers and everyone on the floor to say, like, what can we do to make you more successful at your job? Or are there things that you want to do that you're not doing, or something that you feel like, I really could develop this skill and I think it's going to have a huge impact on my work. And I think it's like, it's finding those gaps, especially with more technologically advanced equipment and all these things where maybe someone just didn't have access to that before, or they're in a new line of work and they can see like, I think I'd be good at this, but I don't necessarily know how to get to that point. And then we can fill in that gap. But that's like, we're working on that now. There's not necessarily a very formal process for that. And I want to formalize it to make sure we're consistently having those conversations all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like white space.
And the one thing I'd add on that, we've always had a summer intern program, and sometimes some of the interns were children of associates, mostly from the outside. But this year, actually, interestingly, in engineering, we've had a lot more young people, children of associates in finishing high school, college, coming in. And I think that's something that having them do the job and go, you know what, this is something I'm really interested in, being here, because I think working in an environment like this, working in any environment is intimidating, but working in a plant environment, the bakery can be, what's it like? So I think by starting younger, is Elana's third generation. We have other associates who are third generation in the business. We have a lot of second generation. And if we're able to develop those young people, we'll just be that much more successful.
You don't really hear about that very often anymore. Multiple generations outside of the company's ownership or leadership. So that's really impressive.
We like to keep it in the family.
Okay, I just have one more question for this episode. And we talked a lot about some of the partner programs that you have with like Refugee One and some of the learning institutions. Are you collaborating with any other baking companies? I was just kind of thinking about, last time I saw you guys was at ASB's Baking Tech in Chicago, and there happened to be several baking companies attending. I mean, I moderated a panel on DEI and the inclusion side of DEI. And so this was a big topic of discussion. So there were a lot of people who were there who were engaging in these kinds of practices. So I didn't know, are you collaborating with any other baking companies to share your ideas or to get new ideas? What does that sort of look like?
We work with the Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network on educational initiatives. In our work with Chicago High School for Ag Sciences, we've actually had Bimbo out to the school and being able to do it. So we are certainly happy to call and talk about it. I think our goal, we want to promote Chicago as a city, both it's great for startups, it's great for headquarters, but obviously our space is a city where things are made. And the city funded our plan for an innovation center, at least to contribute $1 million to our plan. And the goal is to continue to do that outreach. And I think we've mentored and worked with other bakers in terms of doing it. So over the years, I think we've learned our best way to contribute is by setting up the programs. Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network does have an educational program that can be adapted and then, work with other companies. But I think, again, we're going to have the most impact by being on your podcast today, telling our story, doing things in the community. And it's interesting, when we were recently at the restaurant show and the retired CEO of Panera was really interested in our program with people with disabilities. So I think our impact will be probably more across the broader food spectrum of food and ag companies, but clearly very happy to work with bakeries in the process.
Okay, well, I was sitting here thinking, I hope that people who are listening to this episode will be inspired to reach out to you to learn more. And then I also just have to say, it's funny that it feels like I asked if you're collaborating with other baking companies and you're telling me that I'm thinking too small. That you have this opportunity to collaborate with the food industry at large. And that's pretty incredible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Today, moments after this call, we have a call with the Food and Beverage Network with the University of Illinois on programs that we have. And then we have discovery partners with the university. So again, Chicago and Illinois is a place where it's great to make things where people are valued, where education's important. And I think the great thing about our business, we're successful when people come here with backgrounds in food. Baking might be a little too limited. Hey, if they know how to bake and mix, that's certainly an advantage. But a lot of times it's someone who's coming out of a food service background who's able to adapt for what we do. But again, education, the more we do it, not talk about it, the more we do it for our people, the better we'll be.
Yeah, and that makes sense for a baking company that was started by a restaurateur. All right, well, those are all my questions, Marc and Elana. And as you mentioned, you have a very important call just along these lines. So I want to make sure that you are able to get back to putting a lot of good out in the industry. So thank you again for taking time to talk to me today. And next week is going to be really interesting because we're not only going to have some time to reflect on the impact of COVID and what that looked like in Chicago and Fort Eli's, but also the comeback that you were able to stage and talk about the expansion at your plant that you're in the middle of. So I'm looking forward to that. But for today, thank you so much for your time and your incredible insight.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Troubleshooting Innovation, and a special thanks to this season's sponsor, Oaks, your partner for mixing and depositing process solutions since 1946. Visit www.oaks.com. That's www.oakes.com to learn more about Oaks' R&D lab, equipment rental, and more.